Ladies and gentlemen, I am James Madison. Though nearly 2 centuries have passed since my time, I am pleased to be here to contemplate a phenomenon causing widespread debate in the modern United States. Many of you, I suspect, have been puzzled by this question. Why does the progressive side, the left, seem to win more often in many public issues and policy battles? This question involves public opinion, values, and how institutions work. It seems very complicated on the surface. But I want to tell you, the answer is far less mysterious than it seems. It is not about who speaks the loudest, nor whose ideals are the most elevated. It lies in a colder, more structural reality. Measure the power of organization. One of my greatest concerns in life was how to design a system that limits power and protects liberty, while simultaneously dealing with humanity's eternal weaknesses: ambition, self-interest, and the spirit of faction. Looking at the organizational landscape today, I have found that the side that understands how to convert passionate opinions into lasting institutions, stable organizations, and executable processes is often the one that prevails in the long run. The core subject of this speech today is to analyze the mechanism behind this trend. As a political philosopher and institutional designer, I will diagnose why an organizational ecosystem trumps an opinion wave, and where a political side should start if it wants to build a long-term competitive advantage. To understand all this, I need to return to my most central political ideas. When I was younger, I worked with Hamilton and Jay on the Federalist Papers, trying to explain to the American people why the new Constitution was vital for the Republic. In a Federalist No. 10s, I specifically discussed the ancient, but ever-present problem of the mischiefs of faction. In that essay, I wrote, "Liberty is to faction what air is to fire, an aliment without which it instantly expires. But it could not be less folly to abolish liberty, which is essential to political life, because it nourishes faction, than it would be to wish the annihilation of air, which is essential to animal life, because it imparts to fire its destructive agency." This is a profoundly realistic statement. We cannot eliminate factions by suppressing diverse opinions, because that would destroy liberty itself. The real problem is not whether factions exist, but how to control their influence so they do not lead to tyranny. And how do we control the influence of factions? Through organization and institution. In my discussion of republicanism, a core idea was this: in a republic with a larger territory and more diverse interests, it is much harder for any single majority to quickly conspire and oppress the rest. In other words, expanding the political community, allowing the network of organizations to span regions and classes, can actually protect minorities and restrain injustice. But that is only the negative side, the check. In Federalist No. 51X, I further outlined the positive principle of institutional design. If men were angels, no government would be necessary. If angels were to govern men, neither external nor internal controls on government would be necessary. Said, and how do we make an institution control itself? My answer was, ambition must be made to counteract ambition. This means that the various departments of power are not passively restrained, but actively check and compete with each other, creating an inherent stability and rationality. Now, let me connect these 18th century constitutional theories to modern social reality. In my era, these theories mainly discuss the separation of national governmental powers. But in modern society, the same principle applies to the organizational ecosystem in the middle layers of society. A political side that can form a multi-layered, counterbalancing, and professionally divided network of organizations can turn individual passion and opinion into sustainable, reproducible collective action. Achieve Zarza ambition counteracting ambition through internal rules and processes, making decisions more rational and stable. Extend the community and merge diverse voices through cross-domain organizational links, thus forming a reliable majority in large-scale political competition. Conversely, if a side remains in an atomized state, fighting alone, temporarily assembling, and then dissolving after the event, it will be difficult for it to build lasting collective power or resist the organized attacks of its opponents. Now let us look directly at the current reality in America. Over the past few decades, the left has gradually established a relatively complete organizational ecosystem. This ecosystem has several key pillars. First, unions. The organizers with muscle. Unions are the oldest and most disciplined form of organization. They have membership, fee systems, regular training, and a hierarchical leadership structure. Although the U.S. has seen decades of union decline, unions remain among the most organizationally capable institutions in American society. According to the latest data from the Bureau of Labor Statistics, the unionization rate in the public sector, education, police, public services is over 30%, while in the private sector it is much lower. What does this mean? It means that when it comes to influencing key issues like education policy, public safety budgets, or public service reform, the left already has made mobilization channels and communication networks among critical groups. A change in educational policy can be communicated by a union to hundreds of thousands of teachers in days. Second, NGOs and non-profit networks, the wide-reaching capillaries. If unions are the muscular organizers, non-profit organizations, NGOs are the broader, more detailed social infrastructure. With nearly 2 million non-profits operating in the U.S., these organizations are spread across social services, education, health, community development, and advocacy. Unlike the centralization of unions, the hallmark of NGOs is their high degree of dispersion and specialization. This forms a collaborative network of issues, organizations, funding, and volunteers. The left's advantage here is especially clear. When a progressive issue needs to be advanced, such as climate change, healthcare reform, or racial equity, the progressive side can quickly mobilize research institutions to provide white papers, media groups to spread the message, legal groups to prepare litigation, grassroots organizations to mobilize the public, and fundraising platforms to secure money. All of this is supported by years of accumulated trust, agreements, procedures, and experience. Third, fiscal sponsorship and coordination platforms. The invisible neural network. This is an organizational innovation that many people are unfamiliar with, but is crucial. Over the past decade, the left has perfected a system of fiscal sponsorship and coordination infrastructure. Its purpose is simple. It lowers the barrier for new organizations to start. A new social movement or a progressive issue group does not need to build expensive back-office systems for legal affairs, finance, auditing, and compliance from scratch. It can rely on existing platforms. Large fiscal sponsors, like the well-known 1630 Fund, act as intermediaries, providing back-office support for numerous small progressive groups under the 5E1C legal framework. This not only increases efficiency but, more importantly, gives the left flexibility in cross-state coordination, issue incubation, and rapid resource deployment. What about the right? The right is not without organization, but the situation is more complex. The right's philosophy emphasizes the individual, the market, and decentralization. These values are not inherently problematic, but organizationally, they sometimes lead to a fighting alone situation. The conservative side has powerful institutions, think tanks, legal groups, media outlets, business associations, religious networks. But these institutions often have their own agendas, raise their own funds, and run their own campaigns. This is different from the left's relatively tight collaboration network. If the left's organizations are like a complex but coordinated ecosystem, the right's are more like a group of strong islands that are insufficiently connected. However, I must point out that this is changing. In recent years, the conservative side has also launched more professional coordination projects. But the issue is that this elite, level coordination still lacks the large-scale, ongoing, wide-reaching mobilization networks of the left's thick grassroots. A key difference is that the left's union and NGO networks can penetrate schools, hospitals, communities, and streets, connecting closely with the daily lives of ordinary people, while the right's organizations are more focused on donor networks, policy research, and legal battles, somewhat distanced from mass, daily participation. Now let me explain why this organizational advantage ultimately translates into political victory. This involves three key mechanisms. First, hierarchical connectivity and the extended community. I emphasized in my Federalist number 10 that, in a vast and diverse republic, a single majority is harder to form, difficult to quickly conspire, and unable to oppress the rest. That sounds like a negative defense mechanism, preventing tyranny by dispersing power. But in modern society, the role of organization is the opposite. It can weave a synergistic majority together from that dispersed base. Aside with a 5-level linked network, national, state, county, school district, community, can set strategy nationally, localize adjustments through state organizations, conduct daily mobilization and policy execution through county-level grassroots groups, and maintain continuous contact with the public through school, hospital, and community nodes. This is a true network. It has both central guidance and grassroots autonomy. The left's ability to advance faster on many local issues is precisely because it possesses this hierarchical connectivity. Second, professional division of labor and ambition counteraction. I said that ambition must check ambition. At the organizational level, this means a clear division of labor and a mutually checking power structure exists in a mature organizational ecosystem. For example, research institutions provide evidence and policy options, competing and criticizing each other. Grassroots organizations are responsible for mobilization and feedback, enjoying relative autonomy. Media and communications departments manage the narrative. Legal and compliance departments ensure the entire system operates within the legal framework. What is the benefit of this division? First, it avoids the absolute despotism of any single individual or organization, reducing the risk that one leader's mistake collapses the whole system. Second, it makes decisions more rational. When multiple departments analyze a problem from different angles, the quality of the decision is often higher. Third, it increases credibility. A transparent, checked organizational system is easier to gain long-term trust than an organization led by a strongman. In contrast, an organization that lacks internal checks and is highly dependent on a few large donors or key leaders is more fragile in the long term, even if it can react quickly in the short term. Third, compliance framework and the tissue effect. This is a technical but crucial point. Under the U.S. tax code, there are various non-profit categories, 5E1C3 for charity and education, 5E1C4 for social welfare, 5E1C5 for unions, 5E1C6 for trade associations, and so on. These different legal categories allow organizations with different functions to legally engage in varying degrees of political advocacy and activity. A mature progressive ecosystem subtly uses these category differences. 5E1C3 entities conduct research, education, and legal aid. 5E1C4 entities engage in direct political advocacy and lobbying. Unions 5E1C5 mobilize members. This layered design ensures the legality of each organization, while allowing the entire ecosystem to be functionally coordinated and professionally divided. The right is not at a disadvantage here. It can use the same legal framework. The issue is that communication and coordination between the rights organizations in these different categories are often relatively sparse, while the left has gradually formed a cross-category, cross-state, highly specialized collaborative system. If I were here today, facing those who wish to build a long-term competitive advantage, regardless of their political alignment, I would offer the following advice. Advice 1: shift from mobilization to organization Mobilization is a one-time event. Organization is ongoing. Many political efforts pour resources into one-off mass mobilization. A rally, a media battle, an election sprint. These are important, but without ongoing membership organization, clear role structures, and annual operational plans, the gains from each mobilization quickly dissipate after the event. My advice is to establish an annual, institutionalized, and measurable membership system. Every rally, every canvassing effort, every project collaboration should lay the groundwork for the next action. Advice 2: build a federal structure, central unity, local experimentation. One of my core innovations in designing the U.S. Constitution was federalism, a unified national framework combined with the relative autonomy of the states and localities. The same principle applies to organizational design. A strong political side should build a structure where the national level sets strategy, allocates resources, and coordinates. The state level localizes adjustments and develops local leaders, and the county and community levels provide daily services, organize members, and collect feedback. Advice 3: strengthen the back office, shared infrastructure. A common problem is that many new social organizations or political initiatives waste large amounts of resources on back office tasks, legal, finance, auditing, and compliance, instead of on actual issue work. My advice is to build a shared back office service platform. But both the left and the right should invest in legal and compliance, finance and auditing, data and technology, and training and content support. This allows new issue groups or grassroots organizations to launch quickly with minimal marginal cost, greatly accelerating the ecosystem's innovation and expansion. Advice 4: balance elite coordination with mass connection. Elite level coordination is crucial. Top blueprints, talent pools, resource allocation, and institutional cooperation are all necessary. But if there is only elite coordination without mass connection, the system will struggle to gain sufficient public support when it matters most. My advice is coupling, to tightly integrate the elite network with grassroots organizations. Connect think tanks with local groups so policy research can be implemented. But connect media with community groups so propaganda translates into participation. Connect legal departments with ordinary citizens so claims of rights gain public support. Advice 5: institutionalize, ambition counteracting ambition. While the authority and personal influence of leaders are important in an organization, the stability of the institution is more vital. My advice is clear charters and division of authority to prevent centralization of decision making, rotation and term limits to prevent individuals from monopolizing power long term, and transparent financial and accountability mechanisms so donors and members can oversee resource use. These design choices are not meant to weaken efficiency, but to strengthen long-term stability and credibility. An organization with internal checks will attract more lasting followers than one led by a strongman. Advice 6: use, service as the entry point, data as the bond. Finally, I want to emphasize that true organization wins the trust and participation of the public not through propaganda or excitement, but by providing tangible, visible services. The reason many progressive nonprofits maintain long-term volunteer bases is that they provide real help, food assistance, legal advice, educational support, and medical services. If the conservative side wants to build a similar grassroots connection, it should also consider offering ongoing service programs in areas like community safety, job training, family support, and public service oversight. Ladies and gentlemen, my speech is nearly over. Let me make my final summary. The political competition in the U.S. today, on the surface, is a contest of opinion and values, but in essence, it is a contest of organizational capacity. The reason the left has prevailed on many issues over the past few decades is not that their voice is louder, nor that their ideals are more elevated, but because they have built a more mature, layered, professional, and resilient organizational ecosystem. This ecosystem, from the discipline of unions to the dispersion of NGOs, from the flexibility of fiscal sponsors to the daily life presence in grassroots communities, forms a dense yet flexible net. When this net is activated, it can quickly turn scattered passion and opinion into concentrated action. When it is relaxed in daily life, it continues to engage in organizational learning, talent cultivation, and relationship maintenance. Those on the defensive in this political competition need to understand one truth: opinion, heat, funding, and short-term public enthusiasm are all important, but none are as crucial as a stable, multi-layered, professional, and resilient organizational system. The former is like a sudden fire, burning quickly. The latter is like an institution, providing long-term warmth. Returning to my original insight, I said, liberty is to faction what air is to fire. In a free society, factions will always exist. Competition between factions will always exist. The point is not to eliminate factions, but to use better organizations and more stable institutions to make different factions check each other and mutually fulfill each other within the same republic. Those who wish to gain an advantage in this long-term competition should take the work of organization seriously. This is not a secret weapon, but a simple, rational choice based on human nature and social reality. It requires time, patience, professionalism, and sustained investment. But once established, it will be more lasting and effective than any momentary wave of public opinion. What I wrote 2 centuries ago remains true today, Tor. If men were angels, no government would be necessary. If angels were to govern men, neither external nor internal controls on government would be necessary. The same principle applies to every social organization and every political side. True victory is not about a temporary roar, but about whether you can build an institutional system that runs continuously, self-corrects, and accommodates diverse voices. That, ladies and gentlemen, is the secret power of organization. It is not a secret at all, but simply an ancient political truth made concrete in the modern U.S. Thank you for listening.